California. We are here today because grocery workers are facing an enormous threat to their livelihoods. The biggest grocery chains in the country, Kroger and Albertsons, announced a $25 billion mega merger that puts workers at risk of losing their jobs. Boo. Boo. California has more of these two grocery chains than any other state in the country. So our state would undoubtedly feel the effects of this potential merger the most. As we speak, there are hundreds of thousands of grocery workers across this state who are wondering what will happen to their jobs if this proposed merger between Albertsons and Kroger goes through and the companies decide to close stores. An economic roundtable study looked at the potential impacts of this proposed merger in LA and OC counties, the region that I represent, and projected that close to 6,000 workers could lose their jobs if this merger goes through. A mass layoff of this magnitude will have ripple effects through our local economies and communities. In order to mitigate these effects and potential future mergers in the industry, which we have seen a lot, UFCW has sponsored a bill, SB 725, that proposes providing workers with a true safety net to weather the consequences of a merger in the grocery industry. Currently, unemployment insurance is the only safety net that is there to provide for these workers. But the reality is that wage replacement doesn't even come close to allowing these workers to meet their most basic needs. The cost of living in California is incredibly high. With a proper safety net, these essential workers could potentially fall into poverty or deep poverty. Essential workers often live paycheck to paycheck and don't have the savings to be able to weather a storm like this. California has always been the leader in worker protections in this country. But New Jersey, Maine, and Hawaii have adopted stronger protections for laid-off workers in public and private sector industries. California now has the opportunity to show the country that when we protect our essential workers, we are protecting our communities. Without a proper safety net to weather the consequences of a merger, workers won't have the financial security to spend money in their communities, impacting everyone. We, the UFCW, we are the essential workers who risked everything to provide for our Californians during the toughest days. And we would hope that California will stand up and provide for these essential grocery workers during their toughest days. The governor must sign SB 725 into law now. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce the author of SB 725, someone who has stood with us and been a fierce advocate for workers and communities, Senator Lola Smallwood-Cuevas.
Good morning, grocery store workers. What do we want? And when do we want it? What do we want? And when do we want it? And that's the message we're sending California today. We are sending this message to our governor. We are sending this message to our administration. We're sending this message to all of the communities that rely on these essential workers, that it is time that we provide a real safety net. How can I have 115 stores in LA County? And I hate to say this, the very last unionized grocery store in the middle of Crenshaw Boulevard, the largest corridor that runs through my district, I have one unionized grocery store left. And now we see that 115 in LA County, 159 in Orange County are going to be on the chopping block when this merger moves forward. We will not let workers be on the chopping block, and we will not let our essential grocery store providers who cared for us during COVID, who made sure we were fed, who made sure that we had the protections that our family needed of good food and good service, we will not let them be left on the chopping block floor. This bill is about protection. It is a common sense bill. And as I told the administration, and we talked about that this week, we talked about 725. And my point was this: if there's not one layoff as a result of this merger, we don't need 725 to go into action. But should there be 1, 2, thousands, 10,000s, we want to make sure that California workers, LA County workers, Orange County, and across this state, that they are protected. And we cannot do that without 725 being signed this week by this governor. Do we want this bill signed? Yeah. Do we want to make sure we have real safety net? Yeah. We can't just talk about it. We have to be about it. Yeah. We have to be about it, California. And I don't want to be second fiddle to any other state that's providing safety for our workers. We lead the way on worker safety, do we not? Yeah. Los Angeles labor movement leads the way on worker dignity and power, do we not? Yeah. And we lead California, and California, we need you to respond. So I want to say thank you, workers, for all that you've done out here in this hot sun on a hot day, demanding a safety net and justice. Your sacrifice. And it's not just about UFCW. It's about all working people and the safety nets that we must provide. So I'm with you today, tomorrow, and all the rest of my days, because this is about making sure our families have real sustainability, that we have real sustainability for our communities. That's right. And that means good jobs, healthy food, and ending food deserts. That's what this bill is about. We're starting here and now, and we're making that pledge, and we want to make sure that everyone comes along with us by signing this bill and making sure that every single grocery worker has dignity and respect and a safety net to weather this economic storm. I'm with you. Thank you for what you do. And when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. Si se puede? Si se puede? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. It means so much to see our elected officials have working people's back when times are tough. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Grace Garcia, a cashier at Vaughn's in Glendale. Grace will give her remarks in English, and then someone will come up after and translate it into Spanish. Oh, you're going to do it in Spanish too? Okay, all right.
Give me your name, please.
Say your name again.
Mark Ramos, President of UFCW Western States Council and UFCW Local 1428 in Claremont, California. Grace.
Yay, Grace!
Can everybody hear me? Good morning. I am Grace Garcia, a cashier at Vaughn's in Glendale, proud UFCW Local 770 member. I have worked in the grocery industry for 32 years. 8 years ago, I experienced firsthand the pain of losing my job due to the merger. This painful experience did not only hurt me, but it also affected my children and family. In 2015, I was laid off when my store was sold to Hagen as part of the Albertson Safeway merger. Thousands of workers were laid off at that time as well. I didn't have a job for over 3 months, and uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen next was very stressful, not just for myself, but for my children too. I did not know how I was going to pay my rent and feed my children as a single mother, a situation that no worker or parent should have to go through. I was only able to pull through these challenging times with the support of my family. My mom and my sister helped me out financially, but other workers weren't so lucky. My friends and coworkers could not find a job and struggled to put food on the table and pay rent. Some lost their homes, some had their cars repossessed. After 3 months, I was finally able to find a job at Vaughn's, but I had to take a demotion and a pay cut. When I went from making $18 an hour as a checker to $15.75 working in the Starbucks kiosk. When Hagen closed my store, workers did not have a safety net. We were left out on our own, forced to find ways to survive with little or no savings because the cost of living in California, grocery workers usually live paycheck to paycheck. I recently heard that Kroger and Albertsons plan to sell off hundreds of stores to C&S if their merger goes through. To me, this sounds like Hagen 2.0, with hundreds of stores closing and workers being laid off. In addition to that, I learned in the news that if Albertsons top executives quit or are laid off as a part of the deal, they would be entitled to full severance pay of $145 million. But what about us? What about us? What about our customers? We need community-based safety protections in our neighborhood stores. And what about us workers that throughout COVID pandemic put our lives at risk so customers could have the necessities for their families? What about us employees who work nonstop so that Albertsons could set record profits? Grocery workers need protections too. SB 725 will help mitigate the devastating impacts that mergers have on workers and our families, and give us the peace of mind of knowing that we could continue to pay our bills and plan transition jobs. I respectfully urge Governor Gavin Newsom to please sign SB 725 into law to protect hard-working folks like myself so workers can count on a safety net to be able to navigate any financial hardship due to the planned Kroger-Albertsons merger. Thank you for letting me share my story today. Buenos días, mi nombre es Grace Garcia. Trabajo como una cajera en la tienda Allowance en Glendale y con mucho orgullo soy miembro del sindicato UFCW Local 770. Yo he trabajado en la industria de supermercados por 32 años. Hace 8 años yo personalmente conocí el dolor de perder mi trabajo debido de una función. Esa dolorosa experiencia no solamente me lastimó a mí, sino también afectó a mis hijos y mi familia. En el 2015 yo fui despedida cuando la tienda fue vendida en la cadena de supermercados Hagen, como parte de la fusión de Albertsons y Safeway. Miles de trabajadores fueron despedidos y en ese tiempo también. Yo no tuve trabajo por más de 3 meses. Y la incertidumbre de no saber qué iba a pasar fue muy estresante, no solo para mí, pero también para mis hijos. Yo no sabía cómo iba a hacer para pagar mi renta y los alimentos de mis hijos, como madre soltera. Una situación que ningún trabajador o padre de familia debe pasar nunca. Yo pude salir adelante de esos tiempos difíciles con el apoyo de mi familia. Mi mamá y mi hermana me apoyaron financieramente, pero otros trabajadores no tuvieron la misma suerte. Mis amigos y compañeros de trabajo no podían encontrar empleo y batallaron para comprar su comida y pagar renta. Algunos de ellos perdieron sus casas y otros perdieron sus carros. Después de 3 meses, finalmente pude encontrar trabajo en Vons, pero tuve que aceptar un puesto de menos paga, lo cual resultó de menos ingreso. Pasé de ganar cerca de $18 como cajera para ganar solamente $15.75 la hora trabajando en el Starbucks de la tienda. Cuando Hagen cerró mi tienda, los trabajadores no teníamos ninguna red de seguridad. Nos dejaron que nos arregláramos solos. Fuimos obligados a encontrar otras formas de sobrevivir. Con casi nada de ahorros, con el costo de vida en California, los trabajadores de supermercado vivimos de cheque a cheque. Recientemente me enteré del plan de Kroger y Albertsons de vender ciertas de las tiendas a la empresa C&S. Si esa fusión aprobada, para mí esto será una repetición de Hagen 2.0, con el cierre de los cientos de tiendas y los trabajadores siendo despedidos. Además, yo me enteré que por las noticias, si los altos ejecutivos de Albertsons renuncian o son despedidos como parte del acuerdo, ellos van a tener derecho del pago e indemnización de $145 millones. Pero los trabajadores y los clientes necesitamos protecciones de seguridad para la comunidad en estas tiendas y nuestros barrios. ¿Y qué tal los trabajadores que toda la pandemia de COVID pusimos nuestras vidas en riesgo para que nos consumidores pudieran comprar productos necesarios para sus familias. ¿Y qué con nosotros, los empleados, que trabajamos sin parar para que Albertsons alcanzara ganancias de récord? Los trabajadores de supermercado también necesitamos protecciones. La propuesta de ley SB 725 ayudará a reducir los impactos devastadores que las fusiones tienen sobre los trabajadores y nuestras familias, y nos daría una tranquilidad sabiendo que nosotros vamos a poder seguir cubriendo nuestros gastos y planear cómo encontrar un nuevo trabajo. Respetuosamente le pido al gobernador Gavin Newsom que por favor firme SB 725 y ese convierta a la ley para proteger a la gente trabajadora como yo, y para los trabajadores cuentan con la red de seguridad para poder navegar cualquier dificultad financiera a causa de la fusión que planean Kroger y Albertsons. Gracias por permitirme compartir mi historia con ustedes hoy.
Thank you, Grace. It's important to hear from workers who not only will be impacted by this mega merger, but who have been impacted by prior acquisitions and mergers. So thank you, Grace, for being here. Now I want to introduce to you Kimisen, a front-end supervisor from Vons in Montrose. Kim.
Good morning. My name is Kimisen. I work as a front-end supervisor at Vons in Montrose, California. I have served our customers in the community and am a proud local 770 UFCW member for 10 years. I am here today because mergers in the grocery industry, like the proposed merger between Kroger and Albertsons, are putting our jobs and our livelihoods at risk. I work at a small store with several bigger Vons and Ralph's stores within just a few mile radius. Kroger and Albertsons have not been transparent about which stores they plan on selling in the merger. Yet it is very likely that one of those stores that will be divested is mine. This means, and I'm really concerned about my store closing. My coworkers are also concerned. I am worried that this proposed merger and proposed divestiture will basically be the same as Hagen back in 2016. We definitely don't want to go through what our fellow co-workers, friends, and families went to when Hagen closed over 100 stores and laid off thousands of workers as part of the merger between Albertsons and Safeway 8 years ago. The Hagen failure is a disastrous example that shows us what can happen to workers when mergers and divestiture go wrong. A Hagen repeat would be devastating for employees, workers, and our families. Workers would lose their jobs and struggle to buy food, pay rent. As employees, we rely on our income. We all have financial responsibilities. Workers have to meet the high cost of living in California, and if we can't, we risk losing our homes, our apartments. We risk even being able to feed ourselves and our families. Grocery store workers were deemed essential and provided for California communities when they needed us most. And we need the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, to have our backs and provide us with a proper safety net for when the worst case scenario happens with the Kroger and Albertsons merger and other potential mergers in the future. I respectfully call on Governor Gavin Newsom to sign SB 725 into law for working people like me and my coworkers so we can have a sense of security and relief when our livelihoods are in jeopardy because of a merger that is out of our control. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. We need to show our essential workers like Kim that California has their back too, and will protect them if they were to lose their jobs because of a merger or acquisition. You can see behind me in the cameras that there's a Rouse, but what you don't see right across the street is there's a Vons. Rouse is owned by Kroger. Both of these stores could potentially be owned by the same company. One of them will probably have to close. So, boo. I had the great pleasure of getting to meet Kim during our last round of negotiations 2 years ago. And as we sat in negotiations, we heard the corporate executives talk about how important our members are, how important Kim was to Albertsons and Kroger, that they couldn't survive without them. So we urge Governor Newsom to sign SB 25 to show Kim and these others that they demand and deserve respect. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Reverend Andy Schwiebert from Clergy and Laity United.
My name is Reverend Andy Schwiebert. I serve as pastor of Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, a few blocks from here in Koreatown. And I also represent faith leaders from Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, or CLU, and to stand with grocery workers and UFCW to ensure that they have the safety net that they need. I live in Torrance, and 5 doors from my home lived my neighbor, Ramon Bustamante, who served as a cashier at the Vons in Torrance for 27 years. Woo! We saw each other at backyard barbecues and at the Armed Services Day parade in town. And during the pandemic, he kept working on the front lines, even though due to his type 2 diabetes, he and his family were afraid for his safety. After weeks of fighting in the hospital on December 22nd of 2020, COVID took Ramon's life. Ramon and all of his co-workers who serve on the front lines in those most dangerous of circumstances truly were and are heroes. Now, his co-workers are at risk of losing their jobs because of corporate greed and the race to the bottom. If this merger goes through, we know it could result in large-scale layoffs for workers, and without protections, the loss of many jobs in one region have ripple effects through the local economy and further burden an already tattered social safety net. Grocery workers are already struggling to make ends meet, and they are now facing an enormous threat to their livelihoods. Facing reduced hours and unpredictable layoffs while the cost of living doesn't stop increasing, workers struggle to feed their own families. As people of faith, especially when these huge mergers of grocery titans take place in distant boardrooms, we believe as customers and voters and as members of the same community, we are morally responsible to ensure that workers are not left without any social safety net. We don't want to see these workers at our church's food pantry line down the road. We call on Governor Gavin Newsom to sign SB 725 and ensure that grocery workers are treated with the God-given dignity that they deserve and are honored for their years of service and sacrifice. What do we want? Severance pay. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Severance pay. When do we want it? Now. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Schwiebert. Before we go, thank you, Reverend Schwiebert. It's essential to have community support with us to get this essential worker protection bill signed into law. Before we get to Q&A from the media, I wanted to tell you quickly about 2 other USCW sponsored bills that Governor Newsom must support. AB 853 and AB 647. AB 647 will implement stronger and more timely enforcement of California's grocery worker retention law. And AB 853 will shine a bright light on merger deals and how they will impact consumers, workers, and communities. With this package of bills, California can mitigate the effects of mergers on working people. It is absolutely critical that Governor Newsom sign all 3 of these bills into law. When mergers and acquisitions happen, the corporate executives make sure they have a safety net. but the people who they deem to be critical and essential and cannot operate without are usually left on their own. So SB 725 simply says that the folks who work in the grocery stores are just as important to their company as those who work in the corporate boardroom. Thank you for being here. So with that concludes our speaking portion. We're open for Q&A.
Sign the bill! 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 Sign the bill!
Question.